too much.
Yeah, a bit too much. Anyway, hello there, I'm Peter Batt, and this is Fake News.
Fake news, shooby dooby dooby doo. Fake news, shooby dooby dooby doo. Fake news, shooby dooby doo boo. Shooby dooby dooby. Fake news, shooby dooby dooby doo. Fake news, shooby dooby dooby doo. Fake news, shooby dooby doo boo. Shooby dooby dooby bomb.
Well, it's been a while since we've done an edition of Fake News, but today I'm joined by Murray Challans.
Hello, everybody.
A famous figure around these parts, aren't you, Murray?
I like to think so, yeah.
So what do you do and who are you and why?
Well, at the moment I'm on sabbatical. I'm doing very little. I'm taking stock of my life, just generally trying to figure a few things out.
Okay.
And whilst I do that, I've come to a few conclusions.
So, we've had lots of conversations about money, haven't we?
Money and the creation of money.
Well, it's really money and power. And, I mean, for instance, we've had this sort of like conversation about normal currency that economists might call fiat currency, which is created out of nothing by banks when they make loans. And just recently, cryptocurrency, and particularly Bitcoin, which is a cryptocurrency I have a particular interest in. You were saying that you thought that cryptocurrency or Bitcoin was the spawn of the devil.
If not the spawn of the devil, then the spawn of the uncle of the devil. It's one of those things.
Is that in one of those sort of like dodgy relationships?
It's an unspoken relationship.
Oh, okay. That only comes to light sort of 25, 30 years down the line.
In court, yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, carry on.
I firmly believe that government, duly elected, referring back to the people, is the best way of creating money.
Funnily enough, I have issues with that.
I know you do. We were sitting on opposite sides of the table on that particular...
Do you think that governments have got a good record when it comes to money creation?
I'd probably have to say that the most inherent issue about money is that if you create too much of it, it loses its value and you get inflation.
Yes.
And I think the inability for people to deal with inflation, is not so much the government's issue, it's the people that are actually elected. The people get the government that they deserve, fundamentally.
Problem with that is that assumes that the democratic process works well. And the problem about power, and particularly economic power, is that it has the capability often to buy influence over the democratic process. And so that the democratic process becomes skewed very much in their favour, which is what we've got at the moment. We've got unaccountable power hiding behind the scenes, using the democratic process to do their bidding for them and apply their policy perspectives on us, but on the other hand make it look as if it is a perfectly functioning democratic system that works for us all.
I'd probably have to fully agree with you. All things being equal, the government of today, and obviously we refer to England, Britain for our case in point. It looks like it is democratic, it looks like it represents the people. Most people are happy with the system. If not completely happy with it, then they're willing to go along with it. The things that I would like to do is for people to acknowledge how money is actually created. Many people believe that when they go out to work and they pay their taxes, that their taxes actually go towards government expenditure. And this is the bombshell that I'd like to bring forth in this conversation at the moment. The point of acknowledgement is that the government actually spends money into existence, and then your tax money is actually deleted. So when they say your tax dollars are hard at work, your tax dollars are not hard at work. What they're doing is they're deleting money as part of the monetary cycle so that inflation is kept down.
So governments, as you rightly say, they create money out of nothing when they spend it into the economy, and it's deleted when we pay our taxes. Mm-hmm. Okay. The significant thing about that is that there's no interest associated with it. It's completely free. It is actually, technically speaking, an IOU from the Bank of England to us.
Yeah.
Okay. Debt money, it's a rather different thing in that we apply for a loan and particularly a mortgage.
This is the next bombshell, by the way, because people don't realise that this is actually happening at the moment, and that virtually all of our money is created like this. So
97.4% of the money circulating in our economy, or was it 97.6? It's somewhere around there, is actually created out of nothing by banks. Now, philosophically, there's a couple of ways of looking at this. It could be argued that all of those people who apply for a loan are actually becoming their own socialist republic and printing their own money. Because what you do is you fill in an application form for a loan or a mortgage, and the bank treats that form as money. It's called a promissory note. And if they believe that we can honour that agreement, they will treat it as money, pay that into they'll create a balance by tapping some figures into a computer, and hey presto, the money is created out of nothing. So it could be argued that we create the money by writing the promissory notes.
We are money trees.
And we are indeed. Or the banking system creates the money out of nothing by actually taking our promissory notes and therefore legitimising our money. In both cases, money is created out of nothing and deleted back into nothing. So I don't know if you remember, after the financial crash, David Cameron, the then Conservative Party and leader and Prime Minister, was saying that we all needed to pay down our debts because debt was the problem that created the crash in the first place. And he said that because he's a cretin. Basically, if you pay down your debts, if you pay off your debt, the money is deleted, and therefore you shrink the money supply just at the time when we need loads of money because we're going into a recession.
Okay.
And this is the fundamental point that most politicians, most journalists, and most people out there do not know or understand.
Completely oblivious to the fact.
And even when they're told it, they don't understand what the significance of it is. If you consider that that banks, create 97.4% of the money, it therefore gives banks, the money.
Undue leverage, I think, is the
it
word
gives
we're
them
looking for.
considerable power over our lives, and yet, who has ever elected them? Does anyone even know who any of the
These
directors
people are.
of any of the banks are?
I think anonymity is actually part of the banker's little scheme. I mean, after all, what we're talking about here is we are all living in a rich man's world, and we are adhering to rich man's tricks. Now, you may not believe that life is about debits and credits, that money is coming into circulation and then not being spent but being deleted, that when you make your payments back on your loans, that money isn't going into an account, it's being deleted, it's a ledger, it's debits and credits all day long.
But the interest isn't being deleted.
No, the interest, and more importantly, the fees are not. That's where the banks are actually making their money.
So what happens is that they lend you non-existent money
That you created.
in order, therefore, to extract from you real money, which they then hoard away somewhere in some tax haven, thousands of miles away, never to be seen again. And this is why I like cryptocurrency and also commodity money like gold, because governments, bless their little cotton socks, and particularly now are there to mediate power interests. And what this means is that governments and their central bankers have basically followed a corporatist or financial institution sort of agenda through quantitative easing, where, for instance, they bailed out the creditors. In doing so, they insulated the bankers from the consequences of their own idiocy.
Which is quite important because when you have a boom and bust cycle like we do, and we are, as it stands, whilst we have neoliberal economics, we are always going to have boom and bust cycle. In fact, so you all know, we're going to have another bust probably in about the next 18 months.
Yes.
Yeah, fundamentally, and it's going to be caused by the search for yields, as I like to refer to it as.
Do you really?
I do. As that money supply dries up and it contracts, the banking industry becomes ever more desperate to make more money. Hence, you get things like leveraging and derivatives.
Yeah, but that's because if you look at a graph of the money supply, it's rising exponentially.
Yeah.
It's an exponential curve. It sort of goes like that, and then it just shoots up. And what that means is that banks, in order to service the debts that already exist, they have to find ever more ways of lending us money, and it's completely unsustainable because at some point, one, you'll run out of people, you'll run out of resources, which is what we're finding on the planet.
And then the people will run out of resources.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's a finite planet, and this sort of exponential curve it's just madness. It is completely unsustainable. It's like running off the edge of a cliff.
Yeah. And what happens is all of these deals that take place during the search for yields come into focus, and they come into light because people want their money back. Now, at some point, all of these organisations cannot actually make the payments that they have promised. They cannot fulfil their contracts.
One of the things about the financial crash and the institutional response to it is quantitative easing represented the greatest transfer of wealth from ordinary people to the elite, to this financial elite, in human history.
Yeah.
And this, it was a scandal of monumental proportions, and yet barely anyone is talking about it.
No.
Quantitative easing sounds like some sort of accountancy trick or sort of thing, that you do in the dark, under the stairs, on your own, doesn't it? Really, I'm about to ease my quantitative baby. But the thing is that basically it rewarded the bankers for doing, for virtually wrecking the economy. It gave them it gave them trillions of dollars to play with, to reinflate and recapitalise, their assets, in their banks.
And the first thing they did with that money was, rather than actually loan it out, which would have been productive, but of course, in an economy where there isn't much profit to be made, companies don't actually borrow that much money. So if you give the banks a whole load of money, right, then what they're going to do with it, right, is that they're going to follow the search for yields. Yeah, and what they fundamentally did was what they've done is to take that quantitative easing and put it into equities, right, which has fundamentally created another 1,000 billionaires. Yeah,
something like
because
that.
It's created those equities have created an inflated bubble which isn't real. It's fundamentally a Ponzi scheme. Now, this is the problem, right, with boom and bust. Now, the problem, I think, the great problem with the next crash is that we are all up to our eyeballs in credit. I know that I am, for whatever reason. I've got quite a large credit issue that I have to deal with, that I am currently dealing with. But what it means is that in order for an economy to do well and for people to be employed and for money to be sloshing around the system, you have to have money in play. So that quantitative easing has gone to banks that have then funneled it into the hands of a few people. And when the next crash occurs, it's going to hurt a lot of people because personal credit is, I think, the elephant in the room that no one's really talking about.
The Bank of England, about 3 or 4 months ago, were expressing their concern at the amount of debt that consumers were taking on in the UK. And that's a very interesting thing for them to say, because we are already one of the most indebted nations on earth if you add consumer credit, business debt and government debt all together. And so as interest rates start to rise, where's the money going to come from to service the interest on that debt? One of the reasons that interest rates are so low is because in terms of producing new wealth, we're actually very poor. We're
reducing debt.
We're producing more debt, ever more debt.
In the place of and thinking that it is in actual fact wealth.
Yeah, one of the really big problems with debt is it creates the illusion of wealth.
Yeah, that's one of life's little tragedies is that debt pursues you.
One of life's little tragedies is that you actually have to pay it back
Absolutely.
at some point.
Yeah, so the good times can roll, but at some point you're going to have to pay the piper.
Even though you created the money.
Even though you created the money in the first place.
Anyway, it's been a pleasure as ever. I'm Peter Batt. I'd like to thank my guest, as ever, Mr. Challans here, Murray Challans, and until next time, bye. For now!